Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 6.1C-6.2A. I've entitled this video, The Tide Turns. This video is going to cover pages 150 to 155. The Battles of Trenton and Princeton. While the Patriots were struggling through the winter, the main British force was settled in New York. The British also left some troops in Princeton and Trenton, New Jersey. Washington saw a chance to catch the British by surprise. Washington was camped in Pennsylvania, across the Delaware River from the British camp in New Jersey. On Christmas night, 1776, Washington led 2,400 troops across the icy river to surprise the enemy at Trenton the next day. Washington then escaped and marched to Princeton. His army scattered the British force there. Question number 1 from the movie that we watched. What river did Washington cross to attack the Hessians at Trenton? The Delaware River. Question number 2. Washington ordered his sneak attack to occur on the night of what date? Christmas night, 1776. Question 3. What was the importance of Washington's victories at Trenton and Princeton? Well, it helped reinvigorate the troops. It gave the Patriots a second chance, a fresh wind, we can actually do this. We can beat the British. We're not the underdogs. British strategy. In early 1777, the British began a three-pronged battle plan. Their goal was to seize Albany, New York, and gain control of the Hudson River. If they controlled the Hudson, they would cut off New England from the middle colonies. First, General John Burgoyne would lead troops south from Canada. At the same time, Lieutenant Colonel Barry St. Leger would move east from Lake Ontario. A third group under General Howe would move north up the Hudson. The three British forces would then attack Patriot troops at Albany, and you can see that shown on both maps here. You can see Albany was the plan. They were going to come from three different directions. Question number 4. What were the three goals of the British armies in the early portion of 1777? Number 1, seize Albany. Second, seize New York City. And third, take control of the Hudson River. Question 5. Why did the British want to control the Hudson River? Their thought was, if we can take the Hudson River, what we can do is, in essence, split the New England colonies from the middle colonies. Divide and conquer is a very common practice in military battles and wars. Question 6. In what city in the colony of New York were the three British forces supposed to meet at the end of the plan? They were all going to converge in Albany. And you might wonder, why Albany? Why is that more important? Well, Albany has been the capital of the state of New York and the colony of New York for a very, very long time. You might think it'd be New York City, but it's actually Albany. So it's a nice central location, is right there fit, and that's where they're going to all converge. The British capture Philadelphia. Before the attack on Albany, Howe sought to capture Philadelphia, the home of the Continental Congress. Howe won battles in September 1777 at Brandywine and Paoli near Philadelphia. Then Howe's troops captured Philadelphia, forcing the Continental Congress to flee. By now, winter was coming. Howe decided to stay in Philadelphia instead of going to Albany. Question number 6. Question 7. Before General Howe went to Albany, what important colonial city did he capture which forced the Continental Congress to flee? He captured the city of Philadelphia. Question 8. Why did General Howe decide to stay in Philadelphia instead of going to Albany as was planned? Well, winter was coming, and he's like, you know what? I'd rather stay here in the nice part of Philadelphia rather than take my troops out in the wintertime. And let's face it, he was underestimating the Revolutionary War forces. He was underestimating how the Patriots would be able to fight. He pretty much felt like, we've taken Philadelphia. This thing is pretty much over. I'm not too worried about this. The Battle of Saratoga. Meanwhile, the British plan for taking Albany was in trouble. In August, American soldiers led by Benedict Arnold stopped St. Leger at Fort Stanwix, New York. General Burgoyne's army hadn't reached Albany either. In July, he captured Fort Ticonderoga, but he needed supplies. He sent a force to the American supply base at Bennington, Vermont. A local militia group, the Green Mountain Boys, defeated them. Burgoyne retreated to Saratoga, New York. Here, Burgoyne found himself in serious trouble, and alone. Patriots had stopped St. Leger at Fort Stanwix. Howe was still in Philadelphia. Now, American troops under General Horatio Gates blocked and surrounded Burgoyne's army. Burgoyne made a desperate attack on October 7th. The Patriots held firm. On October 17th, 1777, General Burgoyne surrendered. The British plan had failed. The Continental Army had won an enormous victory that changed the course of the war. Question number 9. Why didn't the British forces under St. Ledger make it to Albany, New York, as was planned? Well, he was stopped at Fort Stanwix, New York, by Benedict Arnold. So he sort of hit the skids there as he was stopped by future traitor Benedict Arnold. Question 10. Why did General Burgoyne and his men retreat to Saratoga, New York? They retreated because at Bennington, Vermont, the Green Mountain Boys had defeated them, so they were kind of on the retreat, and they thought that would be a good place to go. Question 11. What happened on October 17th, 1777? A bunch of sevens there. General Burgoyne surrendered at Saratoga, and this was a huge moment in the Revolutionary War. Gaining allies. By late 1777, Benjamin Franklin had been in France for a year. He was trying to get the French to support the Americans' fight for independence. With his skill and charm, Franklin gained many friends for the United States. The French had secretly given the Americans money, but they had not entered the war. The Continental Congress sent Jonathan Austin of Boston to France to deliver the news of the American victory at Saratoga. As soon as Austin arrived, Franklin asked if the British had taken Philadelphia. Austin answered, "Oh, yes, sir, but sir, I have greater news than that. General Burgoyne and his whole army are prisoners of war." Franklin surely understood the importance of this news. The victory at Saratoga was a turning point in the American Revolution. France and other nations now realized that the Americans might actually win their war against Great Britain. France decided to help the Americans. In February of 1778, France declared war on Britain and sent money, equipment, and troops to aid the Patriots. Like France, Spain also decided to help the Americans. Spain did not form an alliance with the United States, but it did declare war on Great Britain in 1779. Spanish forces fought the British in present-day Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. This fighting kept many British troops out of action against the Americans. Now we can answer question 12. Why was Benjamin Franklin in France in 1777? Well, he was working the French, trying to get them to help support us in our fight for independence. He was trying to get them to be our ally, but he was certainly trying to get them to give us money and as much support as they could. Question 13. Why was the victory at Saratoga a turning point? It was a turning point because what it allowed is it allowed other countries of the world to take us serious. And they're like, maybe these Americans could actually win this war for independence. So it gave us credibility. It gave other countries in the world the belief that maybe we could win. And so that allowed them to actually start to help us more officially. And that gets us to question 14. How did France help America in February of 1778? They declared war on Britain, and they also sent us money, equipment, and troops. Question 16 is on the next slide. Here we go. Winter at Valley Forge. In 1778, news traveled slowly across the Atlantic. People in the United States did not learn of the French-American alliance until the spring. Meanwhile, British General Howe and his forces spent the winter in comfort in Philadelphia. Washington set up camp at Valley Forge, about 20 miles to the west. There, Washington and his troops suffered through a terrible winter. They lacked decent food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. Washington's greatest challenge at Valley Forge was keeping the Continental Army together. Snowstorms and damaged roads slowed delivery of supplies. The Continental Army built huts and gathered supplies from the countryside. Several volunteers, including Washington's wife Martha, made clothes for the troops and cared for the sick. Washington declared that no army had ever put up with, quote, such uncommon hardships with such spirit. Quote, naked and starving as they are, he wrote, we cannot enough admire the incomparable patience and fidelity of the soldiery. Joseph Martin, a young soldier from Connecticut, spent the winter at Valley Forge. Quote, we had hard duty to perform, he wrote years later, and little or no strength to perform it with. Most of the men lacked blankets, shoes, and shirts. Martin made a pair of rough shoes for himself out of a scrap of cowhide, which hurt his feet. Primary source, Joseph Martin. The only alternative I had was to endure this inconvenience or to go barefoot, as hundreds of my companions had to, till they might be tracked by their blood upon the rough, frozen ground. Question number 16. What challenges did Washington and his troops face at Valley Forge in the winter of 1777 to 1778? Well, they were facing a terrible winter. They didn't have food, they didn't have clothing, shelter, or medicine. And when we say didn't have any, they didn't have proper or decent of those things. Question 17. What were 3 things many of the troops were lacking at Valley Forge in that time? Well, as we said, food, clothing, shelter, medicine. Many soldiers became sick and died. Other men deserted or left without permission. Some officers quit. The Continental Army seemed to be falling apart. Yet, the Continental Army did survive the winter. Spring came, and conditions gradually improved. New soldiers joined the ranks. The Army grows stronger every day, one officer wrote. There is a spirit of discipline among the troops that is better than numbers. Then, in April 1778, Washington told his troops of France's help. Everyone's spirits rose at the thought. The Continental Army celebrated with a religious service and a parade. And it was in that time that Thomas Paine wrote the famous words, "These are the times that try men's souls." Question number 18. What were a couple of reasons the textbook stated that the Continental Army seemed to be falling apart? Well, many soldiers were sick, some were dying, others were deserting, some officers were quitting. It just looked like things were not going to go well. Question 19. Why did things look better for the Continental Army by April of 1778? Well, the conditions got better. It wasn't as cold. They were getting new soldiers to join in, and when they heard the news of France joining, that definitely was the big thing that helped. Foreigners' help on the battlefield. The Patriot cause had supporters around the world. A number of individuals from other nations gave their talents to the cause. One leader at Valley Forge was Marquis de Lafayette of France. He had come to the United States as a 19-year-old volunteer in June of 1777. Lafayette was excited about the ideas expressed in the Declaration of Independence, and he wanted to join the battle for freedom. He believed that the American cause represented the future of humankind. When he reached the United States, Lafayette offered his services to General Washington. He agreed to serve without pay, and he became a trusted aide to Washington. Question 20. Why did Marquis de Lafayette volunteer to come to America and volunteer to serve without pay in the Continental Army? Well, he did this because he believed in what we were doing. He believed that this fight for freedom, this independent spirit, he believed that was the future of all humankind. Other Europeans volunteered to work for the Patriot cause. 2 Polish men, Thaddeus Kosciuszko and Casimir Pulaski, supported America's effort. Kosciuszko helped build important defenses for the Americans. Pulaski won promotion to the rank of general. He died in 1779, fighting for the Continental Army. And we certainly know a lot about Pulaski in the state of Illinois. Question 21. How did Kosciuszko and Casimir Pulaski help the Americans in the war? Well, Kosciuszko helped build important defenses, so he helped teach how to build like fortifications and make the soldiers better at defending the ground they were in. And then Pulaski was what we would call the father of the American cavalry. He helped teach the American forces how to fight properly on horseback. And so that is a big deal to help the Revolutionary War forces here in America. But what is also maybe not as talked about is in Illinois, the reason we have Casimir Pulaski Day is nearly 1/3 of Polish immigrants in the United States live in the Chicago area. So by far, the most Polish Americans live in Chicago of all the places in the United States. And so that is important for the people of Chicago. And as you know, Chicago has a lot of our members of the General Assembly. And so that is one of the reasons we celebrate Casimir Pulaski Day in Illinois, or why it's celebrated more in Illinois than in most other states. Frederick von Steuben also came to help Washington. Steuben had been an officer in the Prussian army. He helped to train the Patriot troops at Valley Forge and shaped the ragged Continental Army into a more effective fighting force. In 1778, Spaniard Juan de Moraes arrived in Philadelphia. He had persuaded Spain, Cuba, and Mexico to send money to the United States. Moraes became friends with many Patriot leaders and loaned money to the cause. Question 22. How did Steuben help Washington and the Continental Army? he helped to get them trained more into an organized force. So he taught them the ways of the European troops, so they would not retreat as quickly, that they would stay in their ranks and formations, that they wouldn't retreat at the first sign of danger. He helped them with their discipline and their organization. And question 23, how did Marius help the patriot cause in the Revolutionary War? Well, he persuaded countries like Spain, Cuba, and Mexico to send money, which we desperately needed, and he also gave money of his own to help the cause. Well, thank you so much for watching. Before we go, of course I've got a meme, but I've got two for you today. Number one, you might be from Illinois if you know what Casimir Pulaski Day is. And secondly, everyone in the colonies after the Battle of Saratoga. Well, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.